So my name is Yael Schacher. I'm spending this year at the IHS mostly working to turn my dissertation into a book. I did my graduate studies at Harvard, where I received a PhD in American Studies in 2016. Before coming here, I taught briefly at the University of Connecticut and at Barnard College in American Studies. I've always been interested in the history of immigration and asylum, and my dissertation was about the history of asylum. And probably I got interested in the whole topic because I'm the grandchild of refugees from Europe. I'm the wife of a child of refugees from Latin America. So I've always sort of been interested in the histories of refugees and the history of asylum, but actually didn't come to this particular topic of the history of asylum for a long time. It took me kind of a while to figure out what I really wanted to focus on. And I think partly that's because in the United States, asylum is really thought of as a new thing, as a new concept, something that was born legally in the United States in the 1980s. So it was really the provenance of lawyers and political scientists, not really historians. And when I was doing my graduate work, I was taking a class. I took a class for a while, trying to figure out what I was going to really focus on at the law school that really grappled with this contemporary asylum system as it exists now in the United States. And there were these guest speakers. And I was also simultaneously doing research on immigration history, mostly reading interviews with migrants who came to the United States after World War I. And what was fascinating to me, and that was right after a very strict immigration law had been put in place, restricting immigration to the United States after World War I. And what was fascinating to me then was seeing how some of the same issues that I was learning about in the class were actually coming up, or very visible, very present in the historical sources about these women making certain claims. And it struck me that actually asylum, although in the United States only talked about mostly in a contemporary way, actually had a long history, because as soon as you had restrictionist immigration laws put in place, you had in the United States a situation where immigrants would ask to be accepted from those restrictions and make arguments about why they were entitled to refuge because of persecution they suffered, because they feared going back to their home countries. So what I'm working on now is a book that's really about that, about the concept of this long prehistory of what we now consider asylum, based on the idea that as soon as the United States government in the 19th century, late 19th century, sort of took control over the immigration system and there was legislation passed to sort of restrict who could come to the United States, you got waves of migrants at different times asking to be accepted from that, based on these claims of persecution. And it started after the First World War with widows and orphans that I looked at. And after the Second World War, it was frequently students or sailors coming in sort of temporary status. And these were all sort of unexpected migrants, mostly people the US government either wanted to keep out or to only allow to stay temporarily in the United States. And what was really fascinating is that after the Second World War, they were also people who were coming to the United States outside of the sort of refugee resettlement program that the US had set up. But they were also, in making claims for refuge, they were also using the very same language of persecution and freedom that the U.S. government was using in the Cold War and promoting during the Cold War. So what I saw and what I tried to do is sort of chart this century-long history of asylum seekers, asylum advocates, the relationship of asylum seekers, asylum advocates to officials, U.S. officials, sort of charting a long history of the concept of persecution, the way that officials use discretion, and these issues, persecution and discretion, these are issues that are relevant historically and obviously very relevant today. It's a very exciting time to be working on this, especially given the way asylum today, the detention of asylum seekers and sanctuary cities and all these policy issues are coming up. And what I've seen is obviously there's been an immense amount of change over time, but there are certain patterns, historical patterns, and I've been able to track. And it just seems that there's this long history that needs to be told and actually can is useful for advocates today to understand in their work. First of all, I'm learning a lot from the postdocs who are studying, the other postdocs here, who are studying migration in very different times and places than mine. So I'm learning a lot about that. I'm the Americanist here, and there are other people studying different times and places. That's been wonderful. One of the faculty mentors here and I are sort of working on a journal issue on the history of asylum, the prehistory of asylum in the United States. So that's been really exciting. So that's been a great sort of mentorship experience for me. And the other thing, the IHS has all these seminar series, and one of them is this new book series that given by faculty in the history department, other departments, sort of presenting their work. And one of them that was just recently happened was quite inspirational for me, because it was a book on a completely different topic from my own, but it was basically a prehistory of a contemporary concept. It happened to be in the history of science, but that doesn't matter. It was sort of a prehistory tracing a social, intellectual, institutional history of something that we think of as very contemporary. And it was like very inspirational for me, thinking about how to organize and my book as it comes out, because it related and gave me ideas for that organization and that revision. So that was wonderful. In terms of new projects moving forward, the IHS has this great film series this year on migration and film, and I was asked to present, to suggest films for showing over the summer before I arrived, and then actually did present and introduce a film, View from the Bridge, which is a film about Italian immigration to the United States right after the Second World War, based on a play by Arthur Miller. And I got to do all kinds of great research at the Ransom Center. And the more research I did, which was wonderful for me because I was trained as both in literature and history, and it was wonderful for me to go back to the kind of doing literary history research in the archives. So that was really wonderful. But also with all the other historical work I had done in immigration, sort of bringing that together. So there's a fresh take on the kind of literary history I had done in the past. I think I now see the work I did, and I really dug in on that and spent a lot of time, and I now sort of see that work on A View from the Bridge as sort of a chapter in a new book that I hope to do on the representation of migration in literature and film in the United States between 1930 and 1960, which was this time of exclusionary immigration restriction. And that exclusionary era had definite influence on the way migration was portrayed, both aesthetically and thematically, in literature and film. So, Arthur Miller and The View from the Bridge may be one chapter in a sort of new book. IHS has not only given me the experience to sort of revise work I've already done elsewhere in new ways, but also to sort of plan ahead for new projects.